Britain's upper house of parliament approves a bill to block a no-deal Brexit, capping a difficult week for Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who had promised no more extensions on the UK's departure from the European Union. Revolutionary leader or ruthless dictator? Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe's legacy is disputed as his death sparks debate both at home and abroad. And Amazonian nations meet to discuss how to better protect the world's largest rainforest. Though they've signed an action plan, few commitments were made to prevent rampant wildfires from happening in the future. Hello and welcome back to the France 24 Newsroom. I'm Anka Ula. Thank you for joining us again. It's the end of a bad week for Boris Johnson, and things are not looking up for the British Prime Minister. Britain's upper house of parliament, the House of Lords, approved a bill to block a no-deal Brexit, throwing a wrench in Johnson's plan to take the UK out of the EU on October 31st, with or without a deal. Ellen Gainsford tells us more about what options are still available to him moving forward.
As the clock ticks down to the latest Brexit deadline, Boris Johnson remains determined the UK will leave the EU on the 31st of October, do or die.
I'd rather be dead in a ditch.
But the British Prime Minister faces opposition from Parliament, with lawmakers trying to block the option of a no-deal Brexit. And having lost his majority with the defection of MP Philip Lee, followed by his purge of 21 rebel Conservative lawmakers, he's now looking to call a snap election. That's not a simple process either. Under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, Johnson would need 2/3 of MPs, that's 434 of them, to support an election. And on Wednesday he only secured 298 votes. He's set to try again on Monday, if the Speaker, John Bercow, allows it. There are a couple of other options available to him. Johnson could propose a short new law that would specify the date of an election and require only a simple majority to pass. Or, the most radical, the government could call a vote of no confidence in itself. But opposition parties have said they'll block any attempts to hold a snap election in mid-October, until a no-deal Brexit is off the table.
The Labour Party, under the opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn, is very wise not to give Boris a general election quite yet. Say it's called in late October, after he's been forced to rub his own nose in a mess of his own creation by asking for extra time. I'm not sure that Boris will be in a fit state to win that election.
Without any intervention, the next election isn't due to take place until 2022. But with Parliament blocked over Brexit, many lawmakers feel a vote is necessary. It's likely to be a question of when, not if.
To Africa next. Zimbabwe's former strongman president Robert Mugabe has died at the age of 95. Reactions have been pouring in from inside the country and across the world. Even in death, Mugabe has managed to spark fierce debate over his legacy. Some see him as a revolutionary hero. Others say he was nothing more than a cruel dictator who drove his country into poverty. He ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years until he was ousted in a military coup in 2017. James Vazina takes a look at how the political scene has evolved since in Zimbabwe since Mugabe's ouster.
Its processes.
Back in November 2017, after 37 years in power, Robert Mugabe hands in his resignation. Voters are called to the polls the following summer. For the first time, Mugabe's name isn't on the ballot paper. Amid high hopes of change, and after days of vote counting, the final results come in. Then acting president and Mugabe's former vice president, Emerson Mnangagwa, won just under 51% of votes. And the ruling ZANU-PF party secures, once again, a majority in parliament.
As your president, I pledge to act fairly and impartially, without fear or favor, as the president of all Zimbabweans.
A result challenged in court by the opposition MDC party and in the streets. Army crackdowns on protesters have resulted in several deaths since Mnangagwa's election, as well as hundreds of rapes and beatings. In January this year, opposition leader Nelson Chamisa condemned the government's use of military force and criticised African authorities for failing to help out.
I don't know how much blood is supposed to flow on the streets of Harare before Saddam does something. I don't know how many women are supposed to be raped before we begin to see the intervention of our regional bodies.
2 years after he stepped into power, the man nicknamed the Crocodile is facing mounting pressure to relaunch the country's economy. Many Zimbabweans are lacking basic goods as power shortages worsen and fresh water supplies become increasingly erratic.
Next, a Turkish court has handed a 9-year and 8-month-long jail sentence to a prominent opposition leader in the country. Kenan Kaftancioğlu is accused of insulting the president and spreading terrorist propaganda. She played a significant role in municipal elections in Istanbul, in which the ruling AK party suffered a major defeat. Her lawyers say she will appeal, and Kaftancioğlu says the verdict will not silence her.
Hundreds of people turned up to show their support for Kenan Kaftancioğlu. A Turkish court has sentenced her to 9 years and 8 months in prison. Her crime, humiliating the state and insulting the president. This in tweets from 2012 to 2017, where she was critical of the government and public servants. For Kaftancioğlu, the trial is a sham.
During trials, decisions are not made in courtrooms, but in the presidential palace.
Kaftancioğlu is a long-time critic of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. She's also the head of the opposition CHP party's Istanbul branch. The prominent official was instrumental in bringing about the CHP's victory in municipal elections last March. The ruling AKP party lost the mayorship in Turkey's most populated city. The president's party contested the result and demanded a rerun, which it lost again. For CHP supporters, the AKP still hasn't accepted the outcome.
It is not a trial based on law. It is completely based on politics. The AKP seeking revenge after losing the elections.
The Istanbul court refused leniency in Kaftancioğlu's case as she reportedly didn't show any remorse. During one hearing, she read out loud a poem on persecution written by a famous Turkish communist. The opposition figure remains free pending appeal, the first of which will take place in 6 months' time.
The leaders of 7 nations in the Amazon basin have signed a pact to protect the world's largest rainforest, after a record number of wildfires scorched hectares upon hectares of forest this summer. At a one-day summit in Colombia, they agreed to invest more in disaster response coordination and satellite monitoring. Emerald Maxwell has details.
Greeted by an indigenous tribe, Latin American leaders met in the Colombian corner of the Amazon rainforest, as large swathes of it continue to be devastated by a record number of fires.
We're hosting presidents from other countries with which we share this great Amazon heritage, so as to protect it, to look after it, to conserve it.
The Colombian president called the regional summit to strengthen cooperation between 6 Amazonian countries and sign a new pact to protect the world's largest rainforest. A regional agreement already exists to defend the Amazon environment, signed by 8 South American countries in 1978, but it's been widely ignored.
When we sign this pact, we will all know what concrete measures we have to take in the exercise of our sovereignty on the Amazon territory.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who's been at the center of outrage over the fires, didn't attend the meeting in person because he was preparing for surgery, but joined in via video conference. Both he and Bolivian President Evo Morales have come under fire for their slow responses to the blazes and policies favoring deforestation. Last month, Brazil's Space Research Agency said the number of fires in the Amazon was the highest since 2010, sparking international calls for protection to be stepped up. Amid the global concern, some activists, as well as French President Emmanuel Macron, raised the question of giving the Amazon an international status so as to better protect it. Bolsonaro fiercely rejected the idea, calling it colonialist.
Pope Francis is continuing his 6-day tour of Indian Ocean nations in Madagascar. He was welcomed by crowds of people lining the road to the capital, Antananarivo. The man who's been nicknamed the Pope of the Poor is visiting some of the most impoverished nations in the world. He's the first pope to do so in decades. And just as he's done in Mozambique earlier this week, he'll be addressing questions of social justice, peace, and the environment. Well, finally, let's head to the swanky coastal city of Deauville here in France, where the 45th Annual American Film Festival kicked off on Friday. This year's program shines a spotlight on women in film, but opening night focused on men, with an homage to Irish actor Pierce Brosnan of James Bond fame, as well as the premiere of American director Woody Allen's new film, A Rainy Day in New York, which has sparked controversy among women's rights activists in the U.S. who point to Allen's accusations of sexual misconduct. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.